Can you tell me how much more or less it costs to give a child free lunch at a public school?
Well, the Department of Education does not control, that's not part of our budget.
I know, but when the USDA does that funding, it's about $4.60 for a school lunch. Do you know about how much the average school teacher makes at a public school per year?
That varies across different states. It can be anywhere from 40-some thousand to 90-some thousand.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's about $64,000 on average nationwide. So here's an easy one because it's all over the news. Can you tell us how much Congress is being asked to vote on next week for President Trump's ballroom?
One question turned this hearing into a political nightmare. Casar compared Trump's proposed billion-dollar ballroom project to school lunches and teacher salaries, and suddenly the entire room shifted. Then McMahon was forced into a brutal debate about government priorities, education funding, and what Washington values most. Subscribe and watch this exchange closely. Then decide for yourself who won this argument.
I thank the gentleman. I now recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Casar.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to enter into the record a report from the Democratic staff of the Senate Help Committee, which found that the Office of Civil Rights reached a 12-year low last year in protecting students from discrimination. It's titled, Justice Denied, How Trump's Office of Civil Rights Reached a 12-Year Low in Protecting Students from Discrimination, Reaching Zero Resolution Agreements in 2025.
Without objection, so ordered.
Good morning, Secretary McMahon. We're here to talk about the budget for the Department of Education, so I'd like to ask you a couple of questions about school funding and funding in our schools. Can you tell me how much more or less it costs to give a child free lunch at a public school?
Well, the Department of Education does not control, that's not part of our budget.
I know, but when the USDA does that funding, it's about $4.60 for a school lunch. Do you know about how much the average school teacher makes at a public school per year?
That varies across different states. It can be anywhere from 40-some thousand to 90-some thousand.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's about $64,000 on average nationwide. So here's an easy one because it's all over the news. Can you tell us how much Congress is being asked to vote on next week for President Trump's ballroom?
I don't know that answer.
It's $1 billion. And you're a businesswoman, so I'm hoping you can help me do some math here. $4.60 for a school lunch, $1 billion for a ballroom. Can you tell me about how many free school lunches that $1 billion could pay for?
It is my understanding of the ballroom, excuse me, and I've heard the president say this, the taxpayer dollars will not be used to build the ballroom, that they are donations from private enterprise.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'll have entered into the record some Republicans, this article from NBC yesterday, some Republicans aren't sold on $1 billion price tag for Trump's ballroom project in party line GOP bill.
Without objection.
We are voting on $1 billion in taxpayer dollars in addition to those private donations. And so for those $1 billion in taxpayer dollars, at $4.60 a lunch, that is 217,391,304 lunches. That's lunch for more than 1 million kids, 1 million Americans for the entire school year. But let's say that we're not going to talk about lunches because that's USDA. We can talk about teachers. At $64,000 a year, do we know how many new teachers we could hire if we sent $1 billion out to the states for reducing class sizes and hiring more teachers?
I'm sure you have that number.
Yes, it is 15,000 more teachers. Or we could pay for the Office of Civil Rights that's being cut in this budget 7 times over. I think you get the point. So here's my real question here. As Secretary of Education, which do you think helps our nation more? Getting free lunch to more than 1 million more kids, 15,000 more teachers, or the ballroom?
I think those are incredibly weird comparisons. I do believe that our teachers should be paid well for what they do. I think teachers are underpaid. I think teachers should also be paid for performance. And I would like to see us have our teachers be compensated. I'd like to also see that there would be teachers who were paid more than administrators in schools. We have more administrators, and they're paid higher salaries than our teachers are. And I think state budgets, all of that, should take all of that into consideration when they're hiring their teachers, because it is state budgets. Then
I do think it is weird that next week, like you said, it's a weird question, because it's weird that next week we're being asked to vote for $1 billion for a ballroom, while there are cuts to the Department of Education and cuts to education. In my own community in Austin, Texas, they are about to cut 200 positions at Austin ISD, close 10 schools. This budget makes it worse by cutting the equivalent of about 400 teachers' salaries in my district. So I'm asking for you as being a member of Donald Trump's cabinet, to tell us, do you support $1 billion for the ballroom when we could use that $1 billion to raise teacher salaries, as you've said, or use that $1 billion to hire 15,000 more teachers? How can you defend the ballroom, or do you defend the ballroom, if we could use that $1 billion for the needs of our kids in our schools?
Congressman, those budgets that you're alluding to are state budgets. They're not federal budgets.
But we send money to the states and their
salaries-
school districts, and they hire teachers, right?
Teacher salaries come out of state budgets. They don't come out of federal budgets.
When we send federal money to schools, and then they hire teachers. When you send Title I money to schools, when they get grants from the federal government, they hire staff. They hire teachers. They're getting a cut here. We could send $1 billion more, but it sounds like you don't want to defend Donald Trump's ballroom here.
I think the ballroom has many different opportunities, and the president's alluded to them. I think we saw one just recently when there was an attempted assassination on the president's life in a ballroom that was not secure.
Right, and of course that was horrific and unacceptable. The question before us is, if we were to vote on an extra $1 billion, do you think it should go to our kids and education, or to this East Ballroom project?
I think we need to look at the budget overall in its entirety.
And I think the gentleman's
yield
time
back.
has expired.
A congressman walked into a budget hearing with a calculator. No theatrics. Just numbers. And those numbers made a cabinet secretary visibly uncomfortable. Here's why that matters. $1 billion. That's what Congress is reportedly voting on for a presidential ballroom renovation. At $4.60 a school lunch, that's 217 million meals. 1 million kids fed for an entire school year. At $64,000 average teacher salary, that's 15,000 new classrooms staffed nationwide. And the Office of Civil Rights, which just hit a 12-year low in protecting students from discrimination? You could fund it 7 times over. The fair questions. Now, before we go further, the honest questions deserve airtime. Are federal dollars actually what's fixing or breaking American schools? Or have we been pouring federal money into education for decades without moving the needle? Is comparing a one-time capital project to recurring teacher salaries actually apples to apples? And is a secure presidential venue a legitimate national security investment that simply got politically framed? Those aren't deflections. They're real. But here's the problem. Even if every one of those counterpoints is valid, you cannot simultaneously argue Washington shouldn't control education spending, while voting Washington's money into a presidential ballroom. That's not a policy position. That's a contradiction. And Casar's numbers made it impossible to hide. McMahon's deflection. Teacher salaries come from state budgets was technically accurate. But Casar wasn't arguing mechanics. He was arguing meaning. When he said, "You don't want to defend the ballroom here," that wasn't a gotcha. It was an observation. And the silence around it spoke louder than the answer. Every budget is a values document. The line items tell you what a government actually believes is worth protecting. So the question worth sitting with isn't really about a ballroom. It's this: when resources are scarce and classrooms are closing, what does it mean to spend $1 billion on anything other than the kids inside them? That question doesn't have a partisan answer. It has a human one. Drop your thoughts in the comment section. Like, comment, share, and subscribe for deeper political breakdowns. No spin. No fluff. Just the agenda.